Hi everyone. So this is probably the last source discussion session we will have for the semester, for the course as well, because as we know, the final exam and also the final paper they are approaching. So we are going to have a review session instead of a normal source discussion session next week. So this is probably the last one we are going to have. So last week we talked about the works of Castiglione and Machiavelli, in particular how a prince and a courtier, and probably a court lady as well, should be like in medieval Europe. However, we did not have the opportunity to address the topic of European exploration, which is also included for week 13 in the syllabus. So this week we are going to focus on a variety of religious texts, written of course by Christians, and we are going to read and interpret these texts with an emphasis upon how Europeans explored other parts of the globe and how they understood and interacted with people living in non-European parts of the world. First, we have an excerpt from the Spiritual Exercises written by Ignatius of Loyola. In this relatively short text, I would like you to answer some basic questions, like what do you suppose Loyola means by church militant at the very first beginning of the text, and how, as the term militant suggests, might the Jesuits have been the soldiers of Jesus Christ? In other words, as soldiers, what were they fighting for? After Loyola, we will have the letter from India composed by Francis Xavier, who was one of the original companions of Loyola and also one of the original members of the Society of Jesus founded by Loyola. This material, in my opinion, not only provides a window into the life of Christian missionaries in non-European parts of the world, but also sheds light upon the interaction between these missionaries with native local inhabitants and also their local religious beliefs. A basic question to start with. Based on the text, what were the greatest challenges that Xavier and his fellows confronted in those so-called Christian villages around Cape Comorin in India? And when we try to interpret this very text with a different perspective, uh, let's say a perspective of colonial theory of colonialism, we have more information about Xavier himself and also the Western perception of the East. So first, I want to ask you, how does Xavier, as a Christian missionary and also, of course, a European, how his values shaped his perception of Asian peoples, and how might Xavier and his mission have shaped the interaction and understanding of East and West? In particular, I would like you to focus on how Xavier described native religions and native peoples around these Cape Comorin in India. For example, on pages 450 and 451, we have a conversation between Xavier and a group of local residents, which starts with on page 450 at the very bottom of the right column of this page. It starts with the heathen inhabitants, and it ends with to all these questions I was able to reply so as to satisfy them entirely. That is on page 451, the right column. So I want to see an analysis of sentences like these in which you can try to explain or try to make a guess of how these descriptions or the information provided by Xavier in his letter or in his letters, not only about India, but also you can make a guess in Japan and later in China as well. So how these descriptions of Asian peoples reflected European understanding of non-European parts of the world and how these might help shape European perceptions of the East. So that's for this week and also for the end of our source discussion sessions for semester. So thank you for listening and watching this presentation, and I will see you next week for the review session.